Good Sunday evening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode 10 of our year-long celebration of the 50th anniversary of D&D with the top 50 classic adventure modules of all time. My name is Chris, and you're one of your co-hosts. To my virtual left is the usual suspect, Rick. Rick, say hi to everybody.
Folks, we're glad to be back with you, pulling out the old modules for another run, and now we're getting down to the good stuff, right? We're
We are
really
in the top 10
top
tonight,
10
which
has
is
been
awesome.
broken.
10 through 6, and
Yeah.
then one more show, and then our
Woo.
wrap-up show. I'm really looking forward to the wrap-up show, to be honest with you, because
Yeah.
that's where we're going to dive into it really good
Yeah.
as far as like what missed the list, what came close, how did some of them win, and there's some really interesting
Yeah.
stats
There has
that
been
go with all
some.
this.
I can't wait to see the stats myself, and there have been a few surprises.
There have. I think there's definitely one surprise tonight, and I think you're going to
Yep.
see a little bit of a trend. Hopefully someone will pick up what that trend might possibly be. Tonight they might get an inkling of it, but I think you're definitely going to get the trend when you get the last of the top 10. But it's been an interesting exercise, shall we say, going
Yeah.
through all this and everything. So yes, I'm working on 3 hours of sleep. I'm exhausted. I'm literally, after I get done with this show tonight, I am packing my bag and going out to my new house tomorrow and
Oh,
doing the
nice.
final walkthrough and then moving on Tuesday. And then the next time you guys see me on the show, I will officially be in my final destination and hopefully have my office set up, or at least mostly set up.
Sweet.
So yeah, and I got the game last night. That's why I went so little sleep. I actually hooked up with friends last night and we gamed until like 2 in the morning. And I don't do that anymore, and it's really hard
Nice.
because I still wake up at 7 in the morning. And
A
so
D&D or board games?
board gaming. So we
Oh,
did
wow. All right.
Dune Imperium last night. I've
Mhm.
never played Dune Imperium before, and I'm not well schooled on the. It was kind of like when we played the Thing board game, and I'd never
Right.
seen the movie. I've kind of sort of seen the Dune movie, and just enough to know that they stole it all from Star Wars. But and I know everybody's gonna kill me in the chat. I know that's not true. It's being very, very sarcastic. I know. So anyway.
Pay
Um,
attention, folks. If you want to get Chris to see a movie that he probably should have seen already,
yeah.
get him to play the board game
Play the board game
and
first
then
for the
he'll
movie.
want to go see the movie. That's how we do this. This
Exactly.
is how
That's
we're.
how I do things. I'm really backwards in that regard. And then after that, we actually played 2 games of Planet Unknown, and
Love
none
it.
of the other people at the table had played before. That's the one that I got your kid hooked on.
Yes.
And they actually loved it. We actually played a second game and started that second game like after midnight when we're all of us old folks were like ready to turn in, and we're like, let's play it again. And we're like, woo. So anyway, so
Planet Unknown is fun. Yeah. For those
it's an
watching,
amazing game.
Chris came over one time and he brought Planet Unknown, which was unknown to me and my son. And my son liked it so much that I pretty much within 2 weeks bought him a copy
Yeah.
of
It's a
it.
game that features a lazy Susan, and
Yeah.
it's not a gimmick. It
No,
actually
it works.
very
Yeah,
important to the
absolutely.
mechanics of the
Yeah.
game, and it
Yeah.
works amazing. And it's a game that can play up to 6 people, and it's done in about an hour and 15 minutes. It's amazing.
And it's not hard to teach.
No, it's
That's
not.
the thing
It's
is the
pretty
rules
straightforward.
are not
Yep. Learn some
crazy
icons, and you're
complicated.
off and running.
Yeah,
So
just it's kind of like a tile slash dice placer type game, and
yeah.
it's just yeah, it's very approachable. So
But that will be next year's show, the top 50 board
there
games
you
of
go.
all
We
time.
can do
No, we are
that.
not doing that, by the way. So everybody in the chat, calm down. We're not doing it. We're not doing it. So hopefully everybody in the chat's having a great Sunday evening, and we're really glad that everybody could join us for the top 10. We are going to jump right into it because we don't have many other announcements and everything as we are approaching in onto spooky season. And some of us on this call are getting more and more decorating their houses more than other people for spooky season. But anyway, we will move on, and I think we are going to reveal the first. Are you all ready for the top 10, Rick? Are you
I am. I
psyched
am
up or
more
anything?
than ready.
All right. So all right, so let's reveal number 10.
Number 10.
All right.
Okay.
Before the Lost City, I will admit a little bit surprised this made the top 10.
Hmm.
But I'm not complaining because this is an amazing adventure.
Yeah.
1982, a Tom Moldvay classic. And for D&D, not AD&D. So this was before, this was the fourth in the B series. So yeah, the infamous B3. This is the one that followed after it. Your classic. This was the Egyptian adventure before Pharaoh, basically.
Yeah.
It's not hardcore Egyptian, but it's got a lot
No.
of the Egyptian tropes and everything in it. It's set in a desert.
Yeah.
Really neat hook, I thought. The fact that you're traveling in a desert and you run into a sandstorm and you're seeking shelter in deep water, which I thought was kind of a neat way to start it.
Mhm.
And this is obviously one of my favorites. Now, I got to do the OAR conversion. This was OAR number, oh my God, was this 4? I think it was,
Or I want to say,
yeah, I think it was 4. I don't even remember. Yes, I think it was 4. Um, so I do have a pretty soft spot into my heart for this one. I really do love it. But you actually just finished playing this
I
adventure
just finished
for
playing
a
it.
year plus, 2 years,
Yeah,
something like
yeah,
that.
it was a good 2 years,
Yep,
and I went in cold. It was one of the classic modules that I purposely, very purposefully never read.
yep.
I knew it had a good rep. I knew it was a classic, and I wanted to go into at least one classic blind as, an old man. So I set this one aside until, a good game master came along and we were off to the races with it. So yeah, I'm fresh out of the experience as a player. Uh,
So tell me what was one of the more compelling moments that you had in your game? What
Oh
was
my goodness. It was probably, and now again, we were playing the or version of this. We were playing the souped up Goodman version of this. So I think we were definitely in the area where there was a lot more expansion material, and we, definitely toward the end we're running to things that you probably personally wrote. But it was kind of hitting seeing the whole underground city,
Yep.
that and just sort of putting the pieces together, figuring out kind of the big picture, because we're running into a lot of different factions and a lot of different
Yep.
people and odd kind of characters. And it took a while, and we were jumping levels up and down and all around. We were kind of roaming a lot. We didn't do a really steady progression downward. We were kind of bouncing around a little bit.
Hmm.
So yeah, it was just like in the beginning it was confusing because we were meeting a lot of people and we were trying to figure out, all right, who's the good guy, who's the bad guy, who's against who, and that kind of thing, figuring out how the puzzle pieces fit. But when it all started connecting, then it was really, that was wild. And it came to a really good ending. So
Nice.
yeah.
Very, very cool. So yeah, so B4 was the classic. There was a pyramid,
Mhm.
and the top of the pyramid in the original module was all fully detailed and fleshed out. But then there was the inverse part of the pyramid underneath ground, and that was simply an outline. So
Yeah.
it was essentially room 66, monster, treasure.
Yep.
Maybe another sentence of something about whatever, about the monster guarding the treasure or whatever. And then there was that wonderful cross view map
Oh
in
yeah.
at the end of the adventure. There was also a completely underground city in this huge cavern. And it was literally like a sentence or two on like 10 or 12 different locations. And it was just like, here's the city, here's the fungus forest, here's the catacombs. So on the OAR version, I got to actually flesh out all of the catacombs, the entire underground city. I created new dungeons and everything. It was a lot of fun. It was definitely one of the reasons why we picked that one
Mhm.
to actually give the OAR treatment, was because it was so ripe for expansion
Mhm.
and having a lot of fun, kind of detailing it and fleshing it out. So that was a lot of fun. And you said you nailed it right there. The factions are a huge part of the adventure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Either allying, you could ally with any of them or none of them, and then you could pit them against each other, or you could actually join them and actually join their society and everything. So, and that was again 1982, folks. There wasn't a whole lot of baked in role playing notes in adventures back then.
Yeah.
Especially a basic level adventure. So that was a different new concept. And I remember the first time I'm playing it, and it was like, you open the door and it's like, there's humans there, and it's like
Mhm.
you thought twice about, do I just roll initiative and attack them? It's like maybe they want to talk, or maybe they want to interact or something. And it's like, so definitely in my opinion, cutting edge. So glad that this made
Mhm.
it this high on the list, because I do really think it's a very worthy adventure.
Mhm.
I think there's a lot of really good classic tropes there, and I thought it's
Yeah.
done well, and that side view map is amazing. I mean,
Oh,
that
the
cross cut
cross
view.
any
Yeah,
honestly, all the classic cross review maps I love.
yeah,
I don't think there's one I dislike, but this one has a very compelling one.
yeah,
The map and the map of the lost city is just you
yeah,
want to fill it out. As a
yep,
DM, you want to expand it. They give you just enough material to run with, and this wasn't an era where that was definitely more of a thing. I
yeah,
little less DM hand holding and a little more, and I don't say that condescendingly because I think it's important these days, but just a little more, here you go, and we'll let you fill in the rest.
yeah.
I felt I don't I to me what makes this module in a way so good is that expansion capability.
Hmm.
I mean, I totally get that some people could say, well, it's not finished, but really, you're given everything up to I think it's level 5.
Yep.
And then after level 5, for several levels, like you said, you are kind of given what's in every room and just a skeletal treatment. But then even after that, you're given additional notes about the
Hmm.
city. And then on top of that, they kind of give you extra adventure
Hmm.
ideas and
Yeah,
things,
yeah,
which I love because only one or two modules did that, where they
yeah.
give you a couple. I remember when we were talking about the Lost City, uh, or what do you call it, the Forgotten City,
Oh, dwellers. Yeah,
Dwellers.
yeah,
Dwellers did that, which I really love,
yep,
where
yep,
Dwellers had a couple of those suggestions where they said, well, maybe this happens or that happens. And I love those little nuggets because you could really pick one you liked and kind of
yeah,
maybe run with it. And this one does that. So they really give you like a to-do kit, or
yeah,
whatever you want to call it. They give you the puzzle pieces and let you, go. So there's a lot here,
yeah.
I'm looking at this thing. It's less than 30 pages, but it's definitely a module to me that feels longer than 30
Yeah,
pages. It
it
feels like
does. Yeah.
more meat there. There's so many levels,
Yep.
so
Economy
much
of
going
words. We've said
on.
that before. Economy of
Yeah,
words. Yeah.
yeah. Um, a cool map, the way things are buried and levels out.
Hmm.
I always thought it was really funny. The copy I have, or at least the current copy I have, has a very funky blue. I don't know if that's
Oh
just
wow.
printing. I don't know what was up with that. Um, but it had that nice gatefold.
Yeah.
On the gatefold, it's got like the standard adventure packs, and that too wasn't really
That wasn't really a thing
a new
either.
thing there. I mean, a regular thing there.
Yeah.
I remember this being one of the first times I had seen that, where
Yep.
they gave you ready to go packs for adventurers, which seems like such a common sense idea, but it didn't exist at that
And
time.
it's been used over and over since
Oh
then.
yeah,
Yeah, totally. Because
and
it's a great idea to grab and go. Basically, here you go. You
yeah,
need to go do. I mean, some people love to do the shopping part about picking all their stuff out, but most people want to get right to the action. And you get
yeah.
right to the action, grab a pack, pack A, pack B, pack C. There's all your stuff. Boom. And then you're off and playing. So yeah, there's like I said, yeah, a lot to love about this one. A lot
Mhm.
of really good evocative set pieces, and obviously an amazing big bad that
Mhm.
and
Oh yeah,
also republished over the years. They did I think they did a third edition version of this in Dungeon Magazine, where they actually
yep,
kind of did a sequel to it.
yeah.
So it's one of those things, and I think this is one of the ones they Wizards of the Coast just very recently republished in their I believe the Quest for the Infinite Staircases, I think.
Infinite Staircase. Okay.
Yeah, I believe they put it in there. So yeah, so again, we've mentioned that over and over again. We get these evergreen
Yep.
adventures that are republished over several different editions. There's a reason why they're
Yeah.
republished over the editions, because they're classic and folks are drawn to them.
And
So
this one does come up when I talk to people. I think one of the reasons
yeah,
I wanted to run through this as a player is it definitely has a rep. We've talked about some of those diamonds in the rough, like some of the UK
yeah,
modules that maybe don't get the attention they
yep,
deserve.
yep.
But this is one that I feel like is definitely on people's radar as a
It
classic.
is, and I remember internally we had a lot of discussions on whether or not this was going to be one that we were going to do, as opposed to maybe something a little bit more mainstream.
Mhm.
And I think when we revealed it at that I think it was Gen Con or Gary Con. I think it was Gary Con when we revealed the title of the next OAR book. It was very clear that in the room. Now, keep in mind, in the room were the hardcore Goodman Games fans. So,
Yeah.
but it was clear that in the room we'd made a good choice. Like, now whether or not like the whole rest of the RPG, world, customers thought that is one thing or another. But you could tell with the hardcore fans at GaryCon that there was respect for this adventure, and that it was a good choice. And you could tell that people were already figuring out why we picked it out. They were like, "Oh, we know what you're doing there." It's like we know why you picked that one. And it's like, yeah, it was definitely
Yeah.
one of my
Oh
more
yeah.
favorite
Yeah.
ones to do, and absolutely no regrets that we got that one in there, because
Yeah.
I think it
Yeah.
was a great get. So. All right. Any other final comments on number 10, Before the Lost City?
No, I think we're good to roll on to number 9. Time
All
to
right.
pick the top 10 here.
Let's reveal number 9. Drum roll, please.
Number 9.
We're gonna stick with the D&D version. This is 1981's X2 Castle Amber. I'm, to be honest with you, surprised this cracked the top 10.
I am
I
too.
do know that this module has a diehard following,
Mhm.
and I know it is obviously it's huge with the Goodman Games fan base because of the very, very strong Appendix N ties with Clark Ashton. Is it Clark Ashton Smith, I believe it is?
Yeah.
Um, so I mean, obviously, so this is, this one being at number 9 on this list. If you were to do a non-Goodman Games list, this probably does not crack the top 10, I would say. It's
Mhm.
probably 15 or 15 to 20 or something like that. But I think it gets a little extra bump because of because who we specifically pulled for this particular exercise. So
Yeah.
what are give me your overview of what you think about X2.
Yeah. It's certainly Funhouse Dungeon comes to mind,
Yeah.
You get a lot of these crazy rooms, crazy effects. I tend to like that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
It's weird. I have a love-hate, I guess, relation. If a module feels too much like a tournament module, where I've said many times where if you just walk into a room and there's a rope hanging from the ceiling and it just yells, this is the DM puzzle, but otherwise this room makes no sense, I tend not to like it.
Yeah.
Somehow this module felt better than that. There were more
It did.
situations where you had some trappings and some ghosts and some things going on. There's a wonderful feast where people are eating things that have magical effects on them, even permanent effects, because this,
Mhm.
was early days. Uh, and it's just a lot of fun. You can't take it rock hard serious, but I think even if you're not knowledgeable about Clark Ashton Smith fiction, and I was not when I ran this as a DM at all. I had no familiarity with
Yeah,
their
myself
work
as well.
whatsoever. I still enjoyed the heck out of this module. There was still, I guess, the way I look at it is sort of like a slimmed down, condensed version of Tego Manor, where
Mm-hmm.
you took out a lot of the boring rooms, a lot of the extra rooms, and you get it down to, a manageable size where instead of, 480 rooms, or whatever, you've got a more manageable map you can run through.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but yeah, clearly very evocative of Clark Ashton Smith, as you mentioned. There's the background land for the module that the module's set in that has a very Ravenlofty kind of vibe to
Yeah.
it, almost
Yeah.
like a proto Ravenloft. It's
Yeah.
weird.
I made that the mist in the beginning. I thought was
Yeah,
I almost wonder if Ravenloft was inspired by that, if that's where they kind of got that whole the mist to Ravenloft thing kind of,
yeah,
to transport you away and everything. So yeah, I definitely got that feel. Definitely yeah, without a doubt, an Appendix N feel, and definitely those vibes. And apparently there was a lot of inspirations that this adventure pulled. Hey, and I think I can't believe we've actually talked about this long. I mentioned Tom Moldvay again. I mean,
yep,
2 times now in
yeah.
the
Two
top
in the top 10 is
10.
pretty good.
I mean, that's pretty good.
Yeah,
I mean, there's probably, I mean, I don't know. I have to go look at the list, but how many people are going to be multiple times in the top 10? So,
yeah,
I know I've always kicked around the Mount Rushmore of classic adventure designers, and I think Moldvay deserves a spot on there. I mean, without a doubt. So,
yeah.
and I think you're seeing why. I mean, that
Mhm.
and Dwellers was also Moldvay as well.
Yeah,
Right? That was Moldvay and David Cook, I think.
Yeah, it was definitely, I thought David Cook was right.
Yeah, yeah. I might be getting it all confused. When you do 50 of these, you get them all
Yeah.
confused and they all get muddled. But anyway,
I don't think it was solo. It was
yeah, I don't think so either.
either
I don't
Cook by
think so.
himself or Cook and Mulvey, I want to say, but
Yeah,
now I'm gonna have to look it up after this.
I know.
Oh, but
So
you can tell when this came out too, because this and the one we just mentioned, the fact that it was like very early 80s, because now you're seeing these modules sort of hit their stride. You're seeing
yes.
descriptive text, you're seeing the wandering monster table,
Yep.
you're seeing some of the standard formatting start to fall into place
Yep.
where
Yep.
these modules are start to look a little more orderly, a little more DM friendly,
Yep.
a little
Not
more
and these
polished products,
we're starting to get into the ones that were not necessarily tournament modules, that they
Yeah,
were actually commissioned to be write an adventure. And
yeah.
yeah, definitely without a doubt. I mean, this one always reminded me a little bit of Queen of the Demon Web Pits with the alternate dimensions and the going off to the where they would give you, a thumbnail of here's the dimension and here's what's going up, the Colossus attacking the one. And so, and definitely, we have, is it Andre mentioned it in the chat about alternate dimensions, weird tales. Yeah, definitely, it's right up there. I mean, without a doubt. So, he's already got 240 rooms in Teagle Manor,
Nice.
from the 77 edition to the 81 fourth. Wow, he's on it.
He's
So
on it. Yeah, he's
yeah,
got all right.
so
Got an exact number. That's good.
yeah, so yeah, it just feels like a 480. So
Yeah, or it always, I don't know, it always looked very big to me. We'll talk
it
about Teagle
was
Manor another
that
broadcast.
map is
Oh,
sprawling. So
it was one of those classic Judges Guild modules where you open up the map and you said, "Whoa,"
yes,
like that.
exactly. Yeah, talk about economy of words there.
Yeah.
That is about, you can't get any more with that. So, but yeah, I will agree with you. I'll be honest, not a huge fan of this one. I was in that school where I was not a huge fan of the Funhouse Dungeons.
Mhm.
When you said, now that being said, I did think this one was handled better. And to be honest with
Yes.
you, I think when I was playing it back in the mid 80s, I probably didn't even classify it as a Funhouse dungeon. I've heard that
Mhm.
over the years, and I'm like, oh yeah, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, that definitely is. Probably because I think I only ran it like once or twice,
Yeah.
and it just wasn't one that resonated with me. Not like B4, not like B2, even B3. I mean, I
Mhm.
probably played B3 many more times, ran it many more times than X2. I think X2, I think I might have only run once. I know I definitely ran it once.
Mhm.
And it just wasn't, for whatever reason, not my cup of tea and not my group's cup of tea. And then that's for, it was like, oh, that was great, and then kind of move on.
Yeah.
So but yeah, but there was also some really cool monsters, I believe some new monsters in X2, if I recall. They didn't all get the treatment, like the full write-up treatment. There were like some new ones, if I recall, that were like in the text of the adventure. So I always found that interesting, but like if
Mhm.
you didn't put them in the back in an appendix with the full stat box, it's kind of like, I don't know, it didn't feel real. It was weird. It's like we
Yeah.
got a new
Yeah.
monster and it didn't get the full write-up in the back, which could have just simply been for space purposes, to be honest
Yeah.
with you. I always felt like it wasn't like official. It had to get the official treatment. And if it didn't get the official treatment, like,
Yeah.
there's the squirrels in this one that like turns your stuff to gold or whatever, the Midas squirrels or something, or the
Oh,
big
that's right.
ones. Yeah.
And I seem to remember I don't have it in front of me. I seem to remember there being like vampire roses or there being
Yes, I
kind
believe
of
there were vampire roses. There was that whole indoor garden thing with
right, which I liked.
yeah, I love
Um,
that. That was probably we talk about what's the one thing that you think of?
yeah.
Probably the two things I always think of with this module is that the feasts encounter, because I always think about that. And I always think about the indoor garden. And
Yeah, totally.
I did always love whenever they did,
Yeah.
kind of give you that, oh, here's a garden in the middle of the dungeon.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh yeah. And I'm like, that sounds good to me.
Yeah. You were never going to get through a garden without a plant biting you or something not appearing as it was, or
Yes.
there was no purely visual gardens in the D&D days. But I also have to be honest, I think my perception of this and some other modules were affected simply by the fact that they were D&D books and not AD&D books, because
Yeah.
I sort of raised myself more through the AD&D
Hmm.
realm. I didn't go through the progression of
Yeah.
D&D books. Like I didn't do the whole expert,
Yeah.
thing. So a lot of times I would get these modules and I would actually wrinkle my nose at the store because they would say D&D instead of AD&D, because
Yeah.
then I knew, all right, well, maybe there aren't monster manual monsters in here. And then sometimes I would look in the back and I'd see thools instead of ghouls, or I'd see these different things. But so long as they basically had the stats in there, I didn't care. And it was
Yeah.
like that kind of thing. But they always felt, I don't know, it always felt like for me it was a little off-putting if they were D&D, because I was just running everything using the core AD&D
Yeah.
books.
And
So I think
I
that
was just,
affected my perception of this. I think
yeah.
otherwise, I probably, looking at it now, I think I should have liked it more than like White Plume Mountain, for instance.
Gotcha.
And
Yeah.
yet I was more of a White Plume guy back in the day when I was
Yeah.
young.
It's
So
interesting you say that, because I was just like many people, very confused by the whole D&D, AD&D thing, thinking that you had to start with D&D and then eventually you would get proficient enough and then you'd graduate to the hardcover books and they were a lot more expensive and everything. And then only to find out years later that it's not necessarily the way you're supposed to do it. And it was just a very muddled kind of
yeah,
a thing where it was really two different games where they were essentially the same game, but not. But yeah, that never prevented me, or I never distinguished me to like from getting an adventure or something. I
yeah,
did generally get it. I was like, oh, okay, this is a D&D one. This is gonna be a little bit different. So, and back in the day, I probably played very early. I probably played more D&D before AD&D. I remember
okay.
getting the rule books later, and I do remember I did not read a lot back then. I remember like picking up the Dungeon Master's Guide and the Player's Handbook and being, oh, I'm not sure I'm going to read this kind of thing, where I could read the 64-page softcover books and everything. So, M. Fergus 42 brings up the boxing match. That I admit there was that piece of artwork with there were like golem-like creatures, if I
Yeah,
believe they were like with the magus or something. I forget what they were called. They had a weird name, but they're essentially golems. They
yeah,
were.
yeah,
But yeah, there was the one boxing one, and you can get in the ring, and your big
yeah.
bad fighter could get in there and go a couple rounds. I was like, that's kind of interesting. So
I think that was part of the fun of this one too, is there was some situations where the characters could get in, like the degree they could get into things was kind of up to the characters,
yeah,
depending on how greedy your characters
yeah,
were, or how much risk they wanted to take. They could interact a little more with these ghosts or these different things in these rooms and get into trouble, which was kind of fun.
yeah,
But
definitely,
yeah, they, like again, an interesting encounter, a lot of different kind of non-normal stuff going on.
yeah,
So
um,
to me, again, it fits very well. It's not something I want to do every day, but it definitely was good for that, like change of pace. The
agreed.
same reason you'd want to pull out, like an expedition of the Barrier Peaks or anything that's a little out of the mainstream.
Yeah,
This to me is good if you've had your characters and your players grinding through a big standard dungeon and they just need something a little lighter, something a little more where you can get a little more laughter at the table.
yeah,
Like that was
agreed.
time to pull this out.
Agreed. Yeah. And this one was number 15 on the Dungeon Magazine top 30
Okay.
list, right down the middle. So, so like I said, a non-Goodman Games list, this is probably going to be about midway, probably, in the rankings of everything. So,
Mhm.
all right. So that was our number 9, X2 Castle Amber. And now we're going to move to our number 8 on our list.
Number 8.
All right, here's a heavy hitter. Here's a
Wow.
heavy hitter. T1 through 4, the Temple of Elemental Evil. This one's quite possibly the most, or one of the most famous adventures that
Mhm.
are out there. And again, we also did the OAR treatment with this. So the last 3 picks, we've done the OAR treatment with all 3 of them. So again, could be a little bit of a Goodman Games bias here, but I do feel that obviously T1 through 4 belongs in the top 10. And if anything, a little surprising it's as low as it is. If you guys have seen, we've done, what did we do? 4 shows on this module, I believe, back in the day.
Yeah.
So we've dissected this one. If you guys want, go look those up in our old show, Talking TSR, if you want a deep dive. If you have 4 hours of your life where you want to hear all about Temple of Mental Evil, go for it. But you also know that like Rick and I both we have a shared opinion on this, where we actually have some issues with this a little bit. It's a little, so first of all, Village of Hamlet, which is included in this, and Village of Hamlet
Mhm.
did already show up on our list.
Yep.
previously. So this one that was number, like I look at my notes here, number 17 on our list. So that was not too many slots back. So Village of Hamlet's included. We both agree Village of Hamlet's pretty amazing starting. The Moat House dungeon's pretty awesome in it. But the actual Temple of Elemental Evil, would love the nodes. Would have
Yep.
loved them more if they were fully developed. But the dungeon it sprawls, it gets a little samey. It's a little bit of a grind, and it's a little hard to play through. The one time when I had a group try to play through the whole thing from beginning to end, they petered out somewhere between level 2 and 3, and quite frankly lost interest and moved on to other adventures. And I moved them on to, I believe, the Slaver series after that. So,
Mhm.
so yeah, but there's no denying the popularity of this adventure.
Yeah.
The novel, the video game, the fact that it's appeared in almost every other edition of D&D, starting from giant frogs at the Moat House to deities roaming the halls of the dungeon, to the nodes, to the
Yeah.
maps, to the village of Hamlet itself, to the village of Nulb. There is so much here. This was the first true super module,
Yeah.
128 pages. That wasn't something that was cobbled together from other modules. So a lot to love here.
Yeah.
Give me your overall view of what you think about Elemental
Yeah, I
Evil.
mean, this one endures.
Yeah,
You and
that's
I
great. That's great, Mike.
obviously we have a good familiarity with this module. I knew this module very, very, very well. I read through and to tatters 2 copies of this before working on the Goodman Games Original Adventures Reincarnated version, and now I have a third copy that I use to reference that. And then since working on the Goodman version, that then had me go through obviously it with a fine-tooth comb again.
Yeah, you tend to really get to know it then.
Yeah, totally agree with all your comments. It absolutely can be grindy in the upper levels, I think there are some wonderful, wonderful set pieces.
Hmm.
I think part of the reason this endures is it is obviously sort of mega dungeon or mega module or whatever you want to call it. It's one of the first real mega dungeons because it is. It screams Gygax to me.
Oh yeah.
There's just the way the background and the history and the descriptions and the way the villains are written up and given personality and everything. Gygax's writing to me just bleeds through the pages of this more than almost any other book. When I read this, it just reads like he just pulled out all the stops and was putting in his descriptions, and just having fun with it almost. And just, you get these just crazy, I made a note here that it's just like these, in editor speak, you'd call them purple descriptions, these very adjective heavy, almost like Lovecraftian descriptions of things. I jotted down like 3 sentences here because there's this long, long description of the temple when you first see it. And you're given a sort of similar mini description to the Moat House that also gives you this foreboding. But I'm just going to read like two and a half sentences here where he just
A
says,
dramatic reading by
yeah, here you go. Everything surrounding the place is disgusting. The myriad leering faces and twisting, contorted forms, writhing and posturing on every face of the temple seem to jape at the obscenities they depict. The growth of the compound is rank and noisome. Thorns clutch, burrs, stick, and crush stems either emit foul stench or raise angry wheels on exposed flesh, etc., etc. It just goes on with this kind of,
yeah.
this crazy purple prose, which is just wonderful. So the whole thing, the place has a real vibe. If you ever want a dungeon that screams evil to your players, to me, this is it.
In the name.
They literally, they did everything but put out, billboards, in Nulb saying,
Yep.
Like we've discussed, previously, there's certainly pieces that are not done. I direly wished back in the day that Nulb had more meat to it. Obviously we addressed that with our Goodman version, I'm thrilled to say, but I wish back in the day when I bought this product, it had that. The nodes were a disappointment. Cool idea, but they gave you just the Bears framework, I think less than what you were given with the Lost City. You were just given this, super skeletal, here you go, do it yourself kind of treatment,
Yeah.
So that was a little bit of a
And
lesson,
that was the
you know.
expectation for both of those.
Yeah.
The expectation was that the game master was to
Oh
step
yeah.
in and finish it
Yeah.
and do their own thing and
Yeah.
put their own mark on it. It was like
Yeah. You were
that was
expected
the
to pull your weight as a game
yeah.
master,
Yeah, I mean that was why TSR was late to the game on selling adventures, because they were like, wait, who would want to buy
Right.
somebody
Right.
else's adventure? It's
Yeah.
like that's the game
Yeah.
master's, that's where the game master gets their joy out of the game,
Yeah.
not running the game for but designing and everything. And it
And
was like
isn't that evolution really fascinating now?
it's fascinating. Yeah, it really is.
Now it's I see all these third party products and things coming at the DM where we're going to make things as easy as for
Yep.
you as possible, because they view all us DMs as, some of us getting older and a lot of us having families and jobs and all these things where you just don't have time. Where, like you said, and it's such an accurate point to bring up, that back in this day, it was considered like almost like they were cheating you if they did all of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Or like
exactly.
the DM
Exactly.
was going to be frustrated if they didn't get to put their stamp on it.
Yeah.
But again, this one has endured. Like you mentioned, all the various products, all the different spin-offs, video
Video
games,
game
board
novel.
games,
Board game,
novels.
that's right. I forgot
I
about the
mean,
board game
and the
game.
book, and just going back to the adventure itself, it went
Yeah.
through 7 printings. And if
Yeah.
you know anything about this business, if you sell an adventure and it goes through 7 printings, you're
Yeah.
doing good.
Yep.
That's something to be happy about. No adventure goes through 7 printings that's not solid on some level. It's just as simple as
Exactly. Yeah.
um, so I can't think of off the top of my head any D&D adventure that went through that many printings as this thing. So uh to me, that's worth alone. You just picking this up and looking at it for all its little flaws. And I am running players through this right now, so it's really
Nice.
fascinating.
Nice.
They're actually kind of entering level 2. Hopefully, they
Okay.
won't peter out at level 2, because I think really level 2 and on is when it starts getting good. So
Yeah.
that's when, to me, level 3 was really when this baby sings. So I'm anxious to see them take on some of the harder rooms in level 2. And it's worth noting that there are some like cool poem like clues that Gygax gives, and some very hard rooms, like
Mm-hmm.
the
Mm-hmm.
kind of things that even as a DM you have to look at the clues and look at the text and be like, oh yeah, that's how that works out, kind of thing, where I think it would challenge some of the best of players. I think could be challenged by some of the devious puzzles and situations in this. So I'm very anxious to see. I have a group of veteran players that are all solid longtime players, so I really am anxious to see how they handle this.
Yeah. Yeah. I added up my group of 5 players collectively have over 200 years experience of playing role-playing games. Is that
Wow.
insane? That is like insane. And I was like, I actually crunched that numbers and I'm like, whoa, oh my God. Yeah, like that's like, yeah, it's hard to pull something over on them because
Yeah, yeah,
they've seen it all.
right,
They've seen it all,
exactly.
done it
You can't
all.
just give them the goblins on the road, right?
Yeah,
Because
and then you give them death saving throws, and it's like impossible to kill them. So it's like, between all of that knowledge and all of that, they know how to handle things, and
Yeah.
and it's like, yeah, it's rough. It's rough. But yeah, yeah, this is obviously this is obviously a classic. You mentioned Legacy on the Dungeon Magazine top 30 list. This came in number 4. I'd almost argue that that's too low, but it is by all means it is top 5 worthy. Again, I'm actually a little bit surprised that it actually came in 8th on our list,
Mhm.
which should foreshadow a little bit of our top 5 list might be a little on the interesting side,
Yeah.
folks. If this one's coming in at 8,
Yeah.
and if you've been following along on their show, you can probably start kind of figuring what the last few adventures are.
Yeah.
And I think you're going to be a little surprised. I think you're going to be a little bit surprised at what I know I was where things ended up. I would not have been surprised if this one came in number 1.
Hmm.
I would
Yeah, that
not
would have surprised me. I wouldn't have expected that high. And
really. I
yeah.
kind of
And I
thought this
thought with
was
our
going to be
group, I thought the Village of Hamlet would outpace this.
really.
Because I
Mhm.
think people look at the Village of Hamlet as a tighter package, so to speak, than
Yeah.
this.
And certainly
Um,
more people played and ran just the Village of Hamlet because you had a nice little contained, almost a one session dungeon
yeah,
and in a village and all that. So it's like much more approachable. I mean, you didn't have to set months aside for
Yeah,
the whole
yeah,
temple, whereas you could literally do the Moat House dungeon in one night.
yeah.
And you know,
Oh
probably
yeah,
2 nights, but you could do it in one night back in the day. And I think that is what elevated them. But yeah, I guess you're probably right. I guess that's probably surprising. But I just think that when you're discussing the top 10 adventures of all time, Temple of Elemental Evil is like one of the first that comes up. Usually it's in that conversation, where Village of Hamlet, not necessarily. I mean, it's just
yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, people are like, oh yeah, that's part of that one.
Right, right.
But you know, I think, you know, you say the temple, and here's another thing we didn't touch about this too. The fact that this was delayed
Oh
literally
yeah,
years,
yeah,
and that was, you couldn't pay for marketing like that
yeah,
because people were asking where it was, and it was literally, I think it was 6 years, I think it was
yeah.
teased.
It took
And
forever.
yes,
For
and that,
people who
and
weren't there back in the day, if
back in the
you were
day,
waiting for tea, there was
yeah,
a point where I was any little tiny little tidbit in Dragon magazine or
yep,
anything
and
that was
that's where you got your
Gygax even
information.
mentioned, oh, I'm working on the temple, by the
Yeah,
way. I would read
yeah.
that and be like,
You
woohoo.
would get so
'Cause,
excited. You
yeah,
would get
you were like,
so excited.
finally.
Yeah. And it's
And then
like,
it still didn't come,
and
you
keep in mind,
know?
folks, no internet, no Twitter,
Yeah,
no X, no whatever, no Facebook, no. And it's like, so you didn't know. I mean, you
yeah,
found out, and again, there were ways probably to figure this out, but you didn't even, there was no websites, there were no company websites. You didn't have announcements of this is coming next month or whatever. You literally found out when you went to the
yeah,
game
yeah,
store and you walked in, you're like, whoa. And I remember
yeah.
seeing that and going right to it because that cover art, Parkinson
Yeah,
cover
because you
art,
didn't even have release dates. You know,
you
it's kind of
didn't.
like these
You
days,
didn't.
oh, well, the new Monster Manual is coming out
Coming
on
out on this
this
day.
month or whatever.
Yeah,
And it's kind of like you just knew this was coming out at some point. That was
exactly.
as good. And like you said, that's such, in a way, I enjoy that memory of
Yeah,
walking to the game store. And that's in a way why, and to go back to the D&D modules as opposed to a D&D.
yeah.
That's why I ended up with so many of them, because there's so many times I just walked into the game store and I was desperate for a new adventure that I would buy anything that was there, D&D, AD&D, whatever, So yeah.
Nice. All right. Well, we got two more to reveal
Yeah,
here.
we gotta roll
So
on here, I think.
we're gonna wrap it on number 8, Temple of
All right.
Elemental Evil, and we are going to unveil number 7.
Number 7.
All right, you won the Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh.
Nice.
Folks, if you are fans of our show, you know this one is near and dear in my heart, and this is one of my favorite adventures of all time. I am so thrilled that this one came in at number 7. And spoiler, I think you're going to see when we do our last show with the stats breakdown, one of the reasons why this one got as high as it did. And it was very interesting because you couldn't say that for a lot of the adventures
Huh.
on this list. So it was really kind of very interesting.
Okay.
Um, so this is low level. This was the everybody always called it the Scooby-Doo adventure because even the cover looked like the opening scene of the Scooby-Doo song and everything with that
Yeah.
haunted house, haunted in air quotes. I'm not going to spoil anything on a 40-year-old adventure, am I, if I say that the haunted house isn't really haunted? So,
Yeah.
but there is an Old Man Smithers is not in this adventure, but he might as well be in this adventure because he's got almost every other Scooby-Doo trope known to man in there. But this is great. I mean, the low level part of it, penned by our friends over across the pond, the UK, that just knew how to write adventures, was not a tournament adventure.
Nope.
This was a amazing launching part of a campaign because it was the low level. You had 2 distinct parts. You had the haunted house and a little bit of dungeon underneath, and then you
Yep.
had the amazing sea ghost ship, smuggler ship out in the harbor, out in the bay or whatever. That then you could go assault, and that was fascinating how open-ended that was, and there was literally pages of content on like all the different ways they could get to the ship and what the rotating watches were and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, it was amazing because you were not in a dungeon walls. You were not you
Mhm.
could approach the ship from any direction.
Oh yeah.
You could start at whatever encounter. It was just
Yeah,
and
you
yeah,
could
just
swim
getting
up to
onto the
it, row
dungeon
up
was
to
a
it.
challenge.
Yeah.
So
A lot of advice provided in this mod,
yes,
which I
yeah,
liked. I've always viewed this, I don't know how much it was built in that way, but to me it's one of the best beginner modules, I think,
Mhm.
for both players and DMs. As I've mentioned previously, I think in our talking TSR broadcasts, uh, I've used this to introduce children to
Yep,
D&D
yes,
because the haunted sort of manor thing that mainly has outdoor critters and
yeah,
little things thrown in. It's not terribly offensive in any way. It's a nice introductory, where you
yeah,
look at some rooms and they're kind of normal and mundane, and the other rooms have little dangers in them, and it's just, I don't know. I've just found it's a great starter module. I've run it for a group of all kids, and it went off wonderfully. It, like you said, it's got that Scooby Doo kind of mystery vibe, and to me, it feels like it plays a little bit on the exploration tropes we had previously, but then
yeah,
adds a little bit of that mystery on top.
yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I almost miss that. It's not as in vogue these days. The exploratory modules where
Mhm.
things like In Search of the Unknown, there wasn't a whole lot of plot there. These days, if like In Search of the Unknown came out, people would want to put a MacGuffin in there. They want to
Yeah,
have a
yeah,
reason. Just telling the players, oh, you're just going to go through here and find what you find wasn't quite enough.
yeah,
Where in this module, it was sort of like having Quasqueton, but then you kind of had a reason to check it
yeah,
out.
totally.
So
Yeah,
you had the mystery on top of the exploration, which
yes.
to me made it
And
elevated it.
yeah, and then you had the side mystery of the alchemist, the original owner of the
Yep.
house, which had
Yeah.
nothing really to
No,
do
like a
with the
little
main
Easter
part,
egg. It was
but
like a
it
little
was like the
Easter
Easter
egg
egg.
thing.
Exactly. There
Yeah.
was this whole little side
Yeah.
plot thing which was fascinating,
Yeah.
which maybe you didn't even find it, but if you did, it was this whole nother layer onto it. So
Yeah.
100%. Yeah, it is, in my opinion, a masterclass in how to design an entry level
Yeah.
adventure. And you're right, perfect for young kids. Absolutely perfect. They know what a rat is. They know what,
Right.
a
Right.
snake is.
Yeah.
It's like it's not like, a goblin and they're like, well, I don't know what a goblin is. You know what I mean? But like they know what these classic things are.
Yeah.
And so it just on so many levels was great.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that I wish it had more, and I get it, they simply ran out of words with all those pages of advice for the DM, which we laud and we think is amazing and all that. Would have been nice to have a little bit of detail on the village of Saltmarsh. I mean,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
map and
Yeah.
a little bit of a key at least, or
Yeah.
maybe even like a Hamlet treatment to it or everything. But I understand that they couldn't because of, again, they just didn't have that space or whatever. But that's the one thing that I would say is
Yeah.
missing from it.
Yeah.
But hey, again,
It
that's
really makes you wonder if this had been given like a Hamlet treatment where you
yeah,
Salt Marsh fleshed out in that
yeah,
way with this adventure,
yeah.
how
Well, they
famous
did
it would
in,
be.
I think it was third edition. I think it was third edition. They actually fleshed out
Yeah,
Saltmarsh as a
later
Dungeon
on
Master's
they,
Guide.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, they
Um,
mapped it and they actually, yeah, which was interesting that they, so even they knew. They were like, oh, hey,
oh
this is in the
yeah.
right
No, and
place and
even in the
everything.
recent hardcover, they
Yep.
give you a whole
Yeah.
lot more information about Salt Marsh, because Salt Marsh really is it's a great place to set a campaign if you know the Greyhawk campaign world
Yes. Yeah.
where this is set, which isn't terribly far from N1. They kind of, it's just a nice little area to start
Yeah.
in Greyhawk because you've got forest, you've got the Hool, I think it's the Hool marshes right
Yep.
there.
The Hool
Got
Marshes. Yeah.
you've got all these different kind of terrains not terribly far away. I always, when I was a DM, I always wanted to start somewhere where, all right, you had your swamps here and your mountains here, and
Forest over there. Yeah.
if you
Little
needed
village.
any
Yeah.
of those things, kind of, you could find. I never wanted something where the characters had to walk 100 miles to get to a swamp. I always wanted something on the map where I could get to those various terrains, and this is sort of placed in a nice little fun area
It is. It
over in the
is.
kind of like uh southwestern corner of Greyhawk. So yeah, just great thing there. And again, for the DM too, like you're given that nice little manor map, obviously, but to me, much more importantly, you're given this fantastic ship map.
Yes.
And again, at this point, we've seen lots of these ship maps, but when this came out,
It was the
we had
one.
not
It
seen a
was
lot
the
of these ships.
one. Yep.
No. And it was, before this map came out, if you came to me as a DM, now granted, I was young when I did this, but
Me too.
and you said, I want you to map out a ship, I don't think I'd even know
I
how to
wouldn't have had
draw it
any
up.
idea. Would have
But
any clue.
after this module, I could then,
Yep.
with
Agreed.
that and an encyclopedia, I could kind of go and create other ship maps. So it provided a wealth of DM information to the DM as
I
far
used
as
this
mapping out
map
a ship,
probably a dozen times
Yeah,
over the
I
years.
still use it as a
Yeah.
reference for
Yeah.
various things because it's just got a great quintessential ship
It
map of
does.
levels of the ship.
Yeah.
It's a terrific example of mapping out a ship for D&D. So
Yeah. And to give the players the agency to develop their own way to essentially assault the ship
yeah,
was amazing
yeah,
because you didn't normally get that with a dungeon. Normally the dungeon had one way in, or
yeah,
they only knew of one way in. You know, there might have been other ways in or whatever, but this is like you could approach it from any distance. You could approach it during the day, during the
yeah,
night. You could swim under the water to it.
yeah.
You could take a boat. You
And
could
they
try and
account
bluff
for
your way
that.
on.
That's
Yeah.
the thing is, when they write this and they give you the notes,
Yeah.
they approach it in that way. Well, this is what you do if they row up, or this is what
Yep.
they want
It's
to
what you
try to
do if
set
it,
the
yeah.
ship ablaze, or they want to.
Yes, there was the whole rules about
You're kind of
yeah.
covered for those situations. So thankfully, the authors here had the wits to do that.
Yes.
They had all the contingency plans there,
Yeah.
which to me is the foundation of a good beginner DM module is to give the DM a safety net for these weird situations.
Yeah. So this was kind of surprising on the Dungeon Magazine top 30 list. This one came in at number 27. This
Wow.
one almost did not make the list.
Yeah, because right 30.
Which is
So it just
crazy
it
to
is
think
crazy.
that. Yeah, it's crazy to think that, but again, yeah, I don't know. I'm like, obviously, this is why you put lists together and people have favorite lists and everything, and it's like everybody's got their own taste and what one person likes, another person doesn't. So, but yeah, it's just pretty interesting to see that that it barely squeaked on the list, and in our list, it's number 7. It's almost cracking the top 5. So. That's fascinating. And Spooky Dead Man has found it recently, I guess, found a nice copy of this at a big local flea market. I wish I had a flea market near me that had D&D books, old classic
Seriously.
D&D books, and very excited to dig into it. Yes, you should be. You should be very excited, and you should run it if you can in the first edition AD&D version. It's a great fun adventure.
It's really held up.
It
And
has.
I find it fascinating because I do not run into or talk to a lot of people that have run through all 3 modules in this trio.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times you hear from people who they love U1, and then you say, well, what was your experience with U2 and U3? And they're, we never got to U3, kind of thing. For whatever reason, it seems like,
I'm very excited to dig into it. Yes, you should be. We have some feedback going.
Feedback. All right. See, that might be me. Let's see if I can silence that.
Okay, so I think we got it there. So, all right. So I think we're going to wrap up number 7 on that, and we're going to get to our last adventure of the evening.
Number 6.
All right.
Nice.
Number 6, S2 White Plume Mountain, 1979 AD&D. You wanted Funhouse Dungeons? You got Funhouse Dungeons. So this, totally honest with you, this one blindsided me that this one's this high. I mean, it's a classic. I'm not arguing with that, but the fact that this one is number 6 is amazing to me. And I'm gonna throw it right to you to get your opinion. Well, why is this one number 6, Rick? Unless it was you.
No, it was not me. I liked this module when I was younger, but then I think as I gained wisdom, quote unquote, or something as a DM, or maybe just gained age, the whole kind of lack of ecology here just shattered this for me, basically. But there are some really fun rooms and some really fun puzzle situations in here. You always, one thing you always make me think of, which I love, is you always say, like, what do you think of first when you think of this module? I always think of that room with the geysers and the platforms every
Yeah,
time. Like I
every
know a
time.
lot of
There's an
people probably
awesome
think of that
artwork.
ziggurat, and that's up there too. But I definitely think of those darn platforms because
Yeah.
it's such a crazy, insane situation to throw your players into, where they're jumping on these discs, and it's such a fun thing. And I always loved that room with the globes. There was room with the globes,
Yes.
different stuff in
Yes.
them, and you didn't know one had a folded up elemental or
Yeah.
something in it. I
Others
forget.
had coins. Yeah, no, it was
Yeah,
like, yeah,
I
it was,
just there are a lot of fun rooms in here,
there are. Yeah.
but yeah, it's a funhouse dungeon. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There's
No,
no big bad. You have three
no.
super overpowered
But there's two
back
big
weapon
bads
things in
that are
here.
hinted at though.
Right, right.
There's the wizard Caraptus, who is the one
Yep.
that's pulling all the strings and getting
Yeah.
you go there in the
Get
first
you in
place.
here.
And then there's on that map, there's the Draco Lich, the undead dragon, which
Yeah.
you're kind of like you open up this button and like page 2 or page 3, you see there's this map that's amazing, and there's this undead dragon on it, which by the way, back in 1979, there were no undead dragons yet. Like
Yeah.
this was not when Draco Liches were in all the rule books and everything. So that was like you flip that open, you're like, oh my God, we're gonna get an undead dragon. And then you're like, where's the undead dragon? It's
Now,
like
did that map
not there.
appear in the very first printing of this? The first? Because I
The
feel like,
map?
yeah,
Or
like I feel like the mono version didn't have that map, and then
oh,
they came
maybe
out with it.
not. Because I don't do I even own the mono version? I think I
Yeah,
own the
because
mono
I
version,
had
but
the
I've got
mono
it all
version.
sealed up and
Yeah,
everything. So
it was still absolutely early on, and
yeah,
I love that map because that map hinted at all kinds of crazy
yeah.
stuff. It kind of gave the
I
DM,
I would
but
not be surprised if that was something
I
that was
don't
added
think.
around the page.
Yeah, give me a little rope here because I'm going by memory, but
Yeah, me too.
I don't think the mono the very original version of this had that map in it. I
Yeah.
think that was a later edition.
In one more
Um,
week, when I have my collection out of
but
storage, I'll be able to
all
figure
right, yeah, that's another thing.
it
Now
out.
that's two things you have to show. I have to go back and check.
Yeah.
But yeah, I wish to anything we had some sort of final showdown with Caraptus in here.
Yes, agreed.
Just give me a boss room, put the poor guy in there, and let me fight
Yeah.
the wizard or whatever, because it, you had this kind of right three-pronged dungeon. You had this
Yep.
trident sort of thing where you could go in three directions,
Oh,
and
I
each
see what you did
one,
there. I see
see
what you
that?
did there. Yeah. Well, I
And
see Trident Dungeon. I see what you did there.
and you could go any way and ended up in these three rooms, but there was a feeling for, I think, for me and my players when they got to that third room of, well, now what do we do, or now
Yep.
where do we find this person? And I had at least one group that looked,
Yeah.
that were kind of looking where, like, where's the next level, or
Yeah. So
where's he hiding,
if I'm not mistaken, Chris Perkins did a sequel to this in Dragon Magazine.
Okay.
I cannot remember for the life of me. A third thing I need to go look up. If he actually put Caraptus in that, I think
That would be nice.
I don't know if it was though. I'm not sure if Caraptus was actually in the title of the adventure, and I believe the adventure was orchestrated by him again. But I don't know if we actually got to fight him in that one either. I
Yeah.
honestly do not remember. Now I'm really pulling the deep lore cuts
Because
here.
I love that
Yes.
stylized poem you're
Yeah.
given, even with his name is like a snake or something.
Yeah.
At
Yeah.
and again, it's something I feel like we don't see as these sort of clue poems and
Yes.
these framing rhymes and things. I feel like we don't
Yep.
get as much of that as we used
There
to.
it is, folks. Dungeon number 77, Ex Corruptus Amor. Yes,
All
it was
right.
in Latin, but I do not remember if it actually had Corruptus in it or not.
See,
So,
now I'm gonna have to go look at that.
yeah,
I'm gonna have
dungeon
to
number
dig that up.
77.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
So,
to dig that issue up and look at it.
yeah, I'm going to be sitting in my storage unit, not like emptying it out and like digging through books, like looking at things, seeing if the map's in S2 or not and everything. So, this is the fun part about this job that we get to do, that spend our time like pulling these things out and everything. So I got to ask you, which is your, I think I know, but what was your favorite of the three weapons?
Black Razor.
Yeah, I figured that.
Not
You have
even a
Black
question.
Razor written all over you. And I'm sure you can tell what my favorite was. I'm sure you can figure that out.
Yes, because just I think I can't not think of you and think of the giant crab. It's as
Of
simple.
course, yeah, because gargantuan crab. It wasn't
Yeah,
a giant crab. That
yeah,
thing was like the size of a house. I mean,
yeah.
it was like It had like it
And
had like 60 hit points, which is
yeah,
crazy because like a red dragon had like 80 hit points, and it was like
and
nuts.
that illustration I remember very well. That
Yes,
big old crab
that was like a
illustration
whole
where you're
page thing. Yeah, with the bump, with the
yeah,
lake,
where
the
they make
boiling
it
lake
clear
hanging
this
out behind
isn't
it.
just a giant crab. This
Yes,
is like
is the
the
mother of all
Godzilla of
giant crabs.
crabs.
It was the
So
Godzilla of giant
yeah,
crabs. So yeah,
yeah,
I do.
it's funny. It's so funny that you would nail me with the weapon like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, I can't not think of this module and think of you licking your chops over that crab.
Oh
During.
yeah, and I remember I had like a 20th level fighter because when you were playing back in the early 80s, everybody just rolled up just created a 20th level character to have one, and it's like I of course went through this module solo, I believe, and got the trident because I'm like that was the trident that my character wielded because I loved all aquatic things, so it was like it was right there. So
Yeah, I mean, this was definitely at the point when I had this, and maybe this is why this module is so dear and got the rank on the list it did. But I was playing this in my young teens. I think when I was first exposed to this, it was definitely during that Monty Hall stage of
oh yes, oh
when we were
yes,
kind of playing where I remember getting Black Razor and somebody else
yep.
got something else, and we would just it was like, where are the gods we can kill? And it was
Yep.
just sort
Well,
of
when Black Razor was like your backup weapon, like if your +5 Vorpal sword like broke or something, like you always had to have a backup weapon that was almost as good, and you're like, oh, I'll just carry Black
yeah.
Razor in my
I feel like
backpack just
everybody
in
had
case.
that campaign in their youth where they had, that one
Yep.
campaign where either as a DM or you had a player character where they just had
Yep.
way too much stuff that they
Yep.
never should have had, and the DM couldn't come up with anything short of a demigod to challenge you and
Yep.
this and that was my group after we
Yeah.
came rolling out
And
of this.
and then obviously when they put out deities and demigods and statted up all the gods, obviously you had to go and beat them up. I mean,
Oh,
it's like why would they have a whole
and
300-page book
it's
full of
hysterical
stats if
that
you
you
weren't going to
said
go beat
that.
Odin up?
I still have memories of a summer afternoon where we just
Yeah.
paged deities and demigods
Yeah.
and threw those threw them at each other as opponents.
Oh yeah.
We had gone through this and Expedition of the Barrier Peaks in short order, so I think my character had Black Razor and a laser gun, and I don't know what else.
Nice.
Like, I
That's a
think
good
I had the
character right
power. I
there.
think I had the power armor from
Nice.
and it was so ridiculous. But
Oh
good
yes.
memories. Ah, the good old
Yeah,
days.
the back to the days when we had all the time in the world and no
Right?
money.
Yeah.
So,
You could play every
so
weekend, if not
yep.
a couple
And
times a
then
week
some.
during the summer.
Yeah. Oh, totally agree. Totally agree. So, all right, folks. Well, we are over. We could do this
Yeah,
and
we could talk about
talk
this.
on and on
Good
and on. But
times.
that's our number 6, S2 White Plume Mountain, the classic Funhouse dungeon. Oh, which by the way was number 9 on the Dungeon Magazine top 30
So,
list.
so
So
close, so
that's
close.
about right. So this 6 is about. I still think 6 is a little elevated. Again,
Yeah.
I am really surprised. Well, I know what the list is, but I think next show is going to be very interesting to see. I think people can probably figure out what the 5
Yeah.
missing are. The question is, what is the order? And again, it's a little bit of foreshadowing, get people to tune in a month. I think people will be surprised at what actually ends up in what numbers. So, and we might need to do. We'll see how active people are with the thing. We might have to reveal the top 5 like right off the bat because people are going to start figuring it out as we start doing 5, 4, 3, 2,
You
1.
think so?
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah, I think they are. People are
I
going
mean,
to, I think, be
for
calling
me
it
at
in the
least,
chat.
there's definitely a
So,
couple noticeable
oh yeah,
missing entries here.
oh
So
yeah. So yeah, it's gonna be a great show. So everybody, we hope you guys join us in a month.
yeah.
Rick, tell the folks what you got to tell them.
Well, folks, as always, we're delighted you could join us. You can tell we're having fun talking about these. This is why we go over because we're having a good time here, and we're so glad you could join us. As usual, if you're watching us live, give us a follow, subscribe to the Goodman Games official channel if you haven't already. If you're watching later on YouTube, ring that bell. Our next show is coming to you Sunday, November 24th. So we're back at you close to Thanksgiving at
Yep.
8 p.m. And we're going to be hitting number 1 through 5. We're at the final 5. And then, of course, after that, our post-wrap show, which will also be very worth watching.
Yeah.
So please join us next month.
Yes, looking forward to it. So, Rick, as always, thank you for your time and co-hosting. And on the other side of the glass, thank you, Elena, for the amazing Job you taking time out of your schedule for decorating for Halloween to put on a show. So we appreciate that. So everybody have a safe and awesome spooky season and spooky day coming up this week. I will not be partaking in any of that because I will be emptying up boxes and moving things, and but I will be happy as a clam. And the next time you see me, I'll still have this red curtain behind me.
There we go.
But trust me, I'll be in a different room. So, and it'll be my final home for a while. So instead of all this, I feel like such a vagrant moving around. So everybody have a great rest of your Sunday evening and have a good night.
Good night, folks.